You're listening to Salford City Radio, the Friday Sports Show with Jimmy Petruzzi. Salford City Radio, 94.5 FM, with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing you all the news from the local area and around the world. We're very fortunate in this show to have some of the world's best athletes, sports people, coaches, people who participate in sport at all levels, right through to some of the world's elite athletes, coaches. We have had sports psychologists on the show. We've also had a segment on the show. We have a segment on the show. We talk to some of the world's leading figures in psychology and mental health and related fields, giving us a really fascinating insight into their work and research. And today we have a very special guest. We're going to look at the world of yoga. A lot of people know that I'm a big advocate of yoga. Really think it's great. There's a lot of evidence around the benefits of yoga. And we're going to get a really interesting insight into yoga itself and how it can work. And I suppose we've got someone who can explain it a lot better than what I can on the show. So we're going to get a really great insight into the well, we know a lot of athletes use yoga, and a lot of people do yoga now, and it's become, I suppose you could use the word fashionable to a point. But we'll get an interesting insight into the world of yoga with our guest, Danielle Hutchinson of kalmerkidzyoga. Danielle, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board. Hi, Danielle.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on board, Danielle. So just give us an idea, Danielle. Where did sort of yoga start for you? What sort of got you into yoga?
So basically I come from a dance background, and from being a dancer I could feel like the wear and tears on my body, like quite a lot of athletes feel, whatever profession that you're in. And I found hot yoga firstly, so I just found that I felt great, and I was going more for the physical side of things at the start of my yoga journey. And then I was teaching children at the time as well. I was teaching them dance, so they both kind of like was in alignment with each other. And then I was just seeing the pressures of the dance world, and also in most other hobbies, like there's always a competition, there's always some sort of an award at the end. Whereas in yoga there isn't. It's kind of like zero ego. You just show up, and whatever you do is accepted. So then I started going down that route, and it just started getting to me on a deeper level. Like firstly I was just feeling how it affected me, and then my relationships with the people around me. And then when I started teaching, I just started seeing like the progress in people that I was teaching. And then it just went from there, really. That's how I started to get into it. So it was firstly just for the physical side of it, and then after a while of doing it I realised that it's just so much more than that.
That's really interesting you say. And tell us about your experience in India. You sort of went out there to learn. Just for our listeners, what was that experience like? That sounds really fascinating, Danielle.
Yeah, so I decided to go to India because that's like where yoga originated from. And the leader, it was at Sampurna Yoga, and at the time the leader, he was an ex-monk, so I wanted to learn more about the spiritual side of things, and kind of like just like the ancient traditions around yoga and where it came from, and like their culture, which is all about karma really, which is what I believed in, but I didn't realise that it was so in tune with yoga. So it was just kind of like a different level of experience, because when I was out there I was experiencing things without any movement whatsoever, so just through like meditation and breath work.
Yes. My
body felt like it was working in a physical way, and definitely my mind was, without doing any movement whatsoever. So that's how that's like the knowledge that I gained really from it.
That's really interesting stuff. And just my sort of take on some of the things, yoga to a point, and just want to see what your sort of take is on this. And many years ago, Danielle, I sort of came across yoga, and I used to sort of advocate some of the athletes I was working with and footballers would do it. I thought it was really great, and I sort of started doing it myself within sort of reason. I sort of, within the limitations of what I felt comfortable doing. But it was a bit different back then, because you'd sort of turn up to somewhere to do yoga, and you'd turn up, and literally I would just turn up in some shorts and t-shirt. But over the years, I've sort of carried on recommending. And one of the things I've found is people come back to me and it's sort of changed a lot, the landscape, Danielle. Not everybody, but, there's a perception, I think, around yoga now. It's kind of made its way to, the Instagram, social media. And it's great because it raises awareness. But also I think sometimes people got this perception that sort of yoga's, become this sort of fashionable thing, and I'm not saying anything against that. It's great that it's out there, but I can see it being intimidating for some people, because they don't quite understand that you can sort of work at your own level. And what's your take on that? What do you think of sort of, we sort of see now, and fair enough if people sort of, market, endorse products, whatever, it's entirely up to them. But do you not think that in some respects it's sort of gone sort of really, really commercial, in the sense that, what are you wearing and what are you doing and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. And it's taken me a while, especially in Manchester and that town type of vibe, to find studios that are zero ego. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. You're not going to take a video for Instagram to show that you can get into a certain pose. Yeah. Because for me, that isn't what yoga's about. But for a lot of people, unfortunately, it has kind of gone down that route. But then I just look at that as in they're basically just doing gymnastics, in my viewpoint, because it's you can get flexible and you can do all this with your body, but you're not actually finding that meaning. And I think if I didn't go to India, it might have turned out the same.
Wow, that's powerful.
Because, I said, I firstly got into it just for the physical body, and because the hot yoga made me sweat, and I felt good. I felt like I'd done a workout after it. But I didn't get to that deeper level of the meaning of actual yoga until I went to somewhere like India, and obviously everybody can't do that. But there is a lot of great teachers about, and I think it's just finding the right studio or the right teacher, because I've been through loads of studios and I feel intimidated, and I'm not saying I'm amazing at yoga, but I'm I've practiced a lot, but I even feel intimidated, so a brand new beginner would. Yeah. But it's just like anything, isn't it? It's if you go into a room and you don't like the vibe, and it's any sport or any activity, it's just don't pay the money and don't go there again, but you will hopefully find a good teacher. Absolutely.
I mean, the only thing with that is that sort of became apparent to me over the last few years. I'd recommend, say, for example, someone would come on board, a course I was running, or just in general conversation, and I'd sort of mention, do yoga, it's good for you, and so on and so forth. And then they'd come back and say, well, I've been in this sort of, environment, and everyone was sort of dressed up in the latest gear and, doing all the sort of poses and that sort of stuff. And I'm like, wow, I sort of started to realise, well, things had changed in that respect. But, like you said, I think it's a great point you make there. You just got to find somewhere that's comfortable for you. And some people like that, and that's fair enough too. I'm not saying, it's each to their own really where that's concerned, but you can sort of appreciate that some people, obviously might not have that range of movement or just want to do things in their own way, which is, each to their own type thing. Now, you work with children, you mentioned that, and, I think, where possible, great, the younger the better, get involved in yoga. There's loads of science behind the benefits of yoga. It might not be for everybody, but that's like everything really. How did you get involved? Mentioned from your dance teaching, and how have you found working with the children, Danielle? How do they respond in terms of, obviously you've got the skill because you've done dance teaching, and what's been your sort of take on that?
I've found it like great, really. I work with mostly primary, so I even have like year 6 boys who are fully into rugby, football.
Yeah.
Like they're really like masculine, and they'll still go for it and they still enjoy yoga. But I've just like, obviously teaching kids and adults is completely different, and with kids, I'm like a big kid myself. Like I just get bored really quickly. So I try and make my classes quite quick changing, like fast and fun. And it's like getting the content in there as quickly as I can. And I've loved it. Like I've absolutely like loved working with the children and seeing them like genuinely happy without having to compete against each other or having to like win at stuff. And you can see like, say like a group of children, and you can see like a child that's never been classed as great at anything, and then they're in yoga and they're being made to feel like they're amazing. They just like the confidence boost that then gives them is huge. And that's what I'm all about. I'm all about making children really confident in themselves, and also learning them like a little bit of mindfulness as well, so how to like manage the thoughts a little bit better, because when I was a kid, like you never got taught anything like that.
Absolutely, that's for sure. And you know, I think that that's a great thing, and it's really good. You've made some really good points there. I think in regards to sort of competition, it's one of them really. You know, I'm a competitor myself, if I'm honest, Danielle, and many people who do listen to the show are as well. And I think it can, you know, within reason, I think if nothing else, you know, yoga is an escapism from that. I see it as a release sometimes when you're in sort of pressured environment, especially in sport, high-level sport. It's a bit of a release in terms of just being able to be at one and sort of in the moment, which is sort of key. But how much did your sort of background in dance influence the way you do yoga, Danielle? Sort of curious to know, because everyone sort of has their own pathway into different things, and you know, yoga being, you know, one of them, really your pathway. Did doing dance sort of lead you into yoga? Was that something that sort of, you know, you did dance and thought, okay, well, you know, I'll sort of try my hand at yoga? And what sort of influence did dance have on you doing yoga?
I think dance helped, but it definitely didn't, because I remember when I went to dance college and we used to do yoga once a week, and I hated it. Like, I was like, this is a waste of a lesson. I'd rather be like doing ballet or street dance or whatever. But then when I went to an actual yoga class and I could feel that it was helping my flexibility, and it did help. And it's also like the flow of movement, so flowing from one movement to another, that is very like choreographed. So maybe like boxers, I always think this, like boxers or any form of martial arts would really benefit from yoga, and I think they'd be really good at it, because it's kind of like picking up like the movement and the choreography, and then you get deeper into the stretches and postures.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I mean, the range of movement, it's, you know, there's many benefits to that in terms of it helps with injury prevention and flexibility and sort of coordination and many other things that sort of, you know, go hand in hand. That's for sure. So I'm sort of sensing in your own journey there's been sort of pivotal moments, Danielle, that influence the way you do yoga. It's not really been linear in the sense that, okay, you know, I've done yoga and I'm sort of, you know, set up and sort of take classes. And I sort of sense that your experience in India had a big impact on the way you do yoga, from what you say. Would that be correct in saying that?
Yeah, definitely. And in India as well, and this is for anybody that's looking for like a non-egotistical yoga, they teach you it's a form called Ashtanga yoga, and that's basically like no mirrors in the room. There isn't a mirror, there isn't any music, and it's like 2 hours of solid yoga practice, and there are places all around the northwest that do it, and that is kind of like where yoga came from, that style.
Mm.
Because there's like hundreds of different styles, like there is in every form of activity. But that one unique style is basically like where yoga came from, and that's what I was taught in India. So I think when I found Ashtanga and actually enjoyed it more than the vinyasa class with the music and the mirrors and wearing your favourite leggings, when I actually enjoyed the other side of it more, I was like, this is actually benefiting my body and my mind and me as a person so much more than going to that other class.
That's really interesting you say, and I suppose I can relate to that in a way with mindfulness, because mindfulness is an area that I've studied for a long time, and I did a research project for masters on mindfulness, and I kind of looked at mindfulness and thought, wow, like the Buddhism, and you can trace it back to 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, and Hindu and different religions were doing sort of mindfulness. You can make a point, but it's become secular and science based, and I'm all for that to a point, but in some sense it kind of dilutes what it's all about. That's just sort of my opinion, but I sense that's in yoga as well. Sometimes we sort of, from the Western point of view, it starts to get commercialized, which is it gets out there, great, but then somewhere on the line sometimes it gets a bit lost in translation, and that's just my interpretation, Danielle. But do you not think sometimes that can happen where we try and sort of commercialize it and get it out there? It kind of loses its core essence of what it's all about, really, from a spiritual point of view.
Yeah, definitely. And I think again, like that all depends like on the teacher. And I think like where you train as well, but yeah, it definitely does get lost, and I see that. And even though like I enjoy like hot yoga classes, and this isn't against them, like there's probably hot yoga teachers that are really spiritual and really back down to like the grasp of it. But yeah, it is definitely.
Yeah.
Because it's more of a like known thing now. Like I can't remember what yoga teacher it was, but he like basically like I think he like taught Madonna. He was the first like celebrity in the eye of the public.
Okay. Yeah.
And nobody like knew who he was. Nobody cared. And then as soon as she went to his class, that was it. It started getting like commercialized in America.
Yes.
And then after America, it came to here, and then it was like all celebrities, footballers, like were doing it. And I think that just tend to. It happens with everything, I think. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, so for me, my sort of journey into yoga was more along the lines where I'd had like a number of injuries, and I just was looking for something to sort of to help, and I looked at things like Reiki and many other things, and I sort of came across yoga, and I started doing it a little bit myself, and it helped me a lot. I'd sort of tried my hand at things like Pilates, but I felt the spiritualism of yoga was more for me, and I'd sort of do, and because it worked for me, I'd sort of suggest it to other sports people as well, and everything else sort of thing. But it wasn't anything like outside. It wasn't influenced by sort of seeing the celebrities or anything like that. I wasn't even aware of that, certainly at that point anyway. But like you said, you sort of have your own journey there, and you sort of you find your own way. But so your perception before you went to India of yoga, and when you'd gone to India, changed, Danielle, for you?
Yeah, massively. And I think that's just like their culture and the way that they live their life anyway. I mean,
yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, absolutely.
Because like America and England's very go, what you doing next, what you doing next. And then obviously like a place like that where they just live a yogic lifestyle, most of them, and where I was, Goa, which is very calm compared to like the other extremes of India.
Yes, absolutely,
They just the way that they look at things, the way that they look at life, because that's what they teach you over there. It's like yoga, it is literally like a part of life. So it's the way that you are as a person. It's your karma. It's everything. It's not just like rolling out a mat and doing a practice. It's like how you live from day to day.
Your way of life, absolutely. And I guess it's about adapting it to the world we live in. I mean, I sort of think a happy medium somewhere in between, in terms of, obviously, each to their own. But for me, I guess you sort of, cherry pick what's right for you, and you adapt that. And did you find that you take these learnings from India, a great experience, it's an amazing country, amazing people, back to the UK, and I'm obviously this country, the UK is a great place, and and then you sort of adapt it. Do you then sort of adapt what you learn there to the Western world, so to speak? Danielle, is that sort of what you found yourself doing?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, it's about, like, quickly as a teacher, like, picking up the energy in the room.
Yeah.
So if I went into a room, say, for example, if I did a yoga class with you and like-minded people like you,
yeah.
I would go deep into, like, the spiritual side of things because I know that that's what you're into.
Yes. Yeah.
But then, for example, if it was a group of, like, young, like, rowdy footballers that weren't really interested in the spiritual side of things, I would do it more as a physical.
Yes.
And then obviously with the kids, I have to constantly adapt to what I think, like, if they're getting bored or what style I think that they'd like. So yeah, you do. You have to, like, massively adapt. And I was lucky as well because when you do your training, you're surrounded by people who practice yoga, so they're all at an expertise level.
Yes.
So you learn really, like, when you come back and you're teaching people that have never ever been to a yoga class before.
Absolutely,
yeah, you're teaching them that side of things. And I remember coming back and I taught, like, a group of, like, middle-aged ladies who had never done yoga before. And I went down the spiritual route and they didn't like it. Like, they all gave me feedback and was like, we just want, like, a nice stretch after work.
Wow, that's really interesting stuff. That's really interesting what you say, Danielle. And I suppose in saying that, it sort of shows your own, if we could call it, evolution in the way you see the world. Because I suppose a lot of people could have taken that, as a the feedback as a personal thing, and in terms of, I know certainly in my experience, I've done seminars all over, and sometimes, you kind of grow and you adapt wherever you are. But did you feel, okay, that's their point of view, fair enough, I'll just adapt it?
Yeah, and I get it quite a lot as well. Like, I've had it recently because I work with children, and I've had, like, comments like, oh, you can tell you're a kids teacher, like, you're very, like, a bit too enthusiastic and a bit too this and a bit too that. But everybody's going to have their opinion, and everybody's going to find. Because even myself, like, I've been to a yoga teacher and thought, oh, that's not my style. And it's not to do with them. They've got more training than me. They're probably better than me, but it's just not for me. And you just kind of, I think you learn that as you get older, though. You just start brushing it off, and you just find your
tribe, find the market. You set your stall out, and you won't be for everybody. And I suppose anyone sort of aspiring to be a sort of yoga facilitator, listening to the show, is you set your stall out, and like any profession, you're not going to be for everybody, but there'll be people out there that do, and you do work well with, and that's the sort of key to it. Just in terms of, you sort of made reference to hot yoga a few times. Just for our listeners, Danielle, are you able to sort of what hot yoga is that okay to sort of clarify?
Yeah, so basically, normally it's in a heated room that's above, I think it's like 30 degrees.
Sure, yeah.
And they do it through a certain type of heater. I'm not sure of the name of it. And basically, it's like just your standard yoga class. So if you've been, it's just like a standard vinyasa, like quite fast flow. But the benefits of it are like a lot extra than just like a normal class. So obviously, it's like your body's heated, so it can stretch more.
Wow.
But then there is the risk of overstretching.
Yes.
And I think people, it's just like all the benefits of like sweating and just kind of like getting it all out, because you do, like, it's like Bikram yoga. There are benefits, but there's also been like a lot of controversy about it, saying like you can overstretch your body. It's not real yoga, which, to be honest, unless you're teaching a certain style, maybe it's not. I don't know.
Sure. I mean,
it is great if you want to try it for like a one-off and you want like a really good sweat session.
Yeah, and I'm sort of sensing that, like many different areas, there's a bit of politics involved, and what's real yoga, what's not real yoga. And I think for me, it's I don't profess to be an expert in yoga, Danielle, by any stretch of the imagination. But do you not think sometimes that can sort of put people off as well when you sort of hear, well, this isn't right and this is whatever, and someone just wants to start and see how they go. Do you not think that sort of politics in sort of what's real and not real can get in the way of people wanting to sort of begin?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because you're just hearing, aren't you, like off everybody's different opinions.
Yeah.
But again, I just think like do your research. Even if you just go to your standard yoga studio at the end of your street or wherever it is. And normally there's a variety of teachers and you'll just find one teacher. Like I found one teacher in hot yoga that I really clicked with, and she did the training in India, so it kind of like led me back to that. But you just got to try loads of them out. Do you know what I mean? And I think or try like different styles online, because there's so many different styles of yoga as well.
And find the one that works for you, for sure. So if anyone listening is thinking, okay, I'd like to do yoga, what would you say? Would you say try different styles and see what works for you, or what would be your sort of take on it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at the minute with the current climate, like you can't really do hot anyway.
Of course, yeah, of course, yeah.
But yeah, like online, there's so many amazing platforms, and at the minute, because everything's moving online, there is loads of great teachers. So I'd say, yeah, just literally get on YouTube, try a little 20-minute video, see which style you like, and then Google like your nearest one. Because I think after this as well, like yoga studios and places like that are going to need a massive boost.
Absolutely.
And I think the world's changing in that way as well. I think like a lot more people will be doing yoga, and hopefully the world won't be so Instagram in a few years. I see it going down more of a like spiritual, I think spiritual is the right word, but more of a like less ego type of world I see for the future.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean, yeah, absolutely. In terms of what you said there, at the time of this recording, we're in the UK anyway. We're in lockdown, so pre-recording. So just to sort of remind the listeners, in case when the show airs, things are different for sure. So that's important to make that point. In terms of like the social media thing, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sort of think social media is a great great resource. You can connect with people around the world, put a message out there. You can do things that whatever. I suppose it's each to their own how they sort of decide to use it, as long as they sort of use it above board and don't sort of, in that respect. I think sometimes it can be harsh. Certainly some of the sports people I sort of work with at times, it can be difficult because obviously I'm all for people having their opinion, but sometimes some comments and stuff can be sort of cross that line really. I always say to people in that respect, think about before you comment, imagine if it's your family or your brother, your sister, your daughter, whatever in that respect. But the point being is, I think certainly the crisis that we face around the world, I think for sure is going to change people's perceptions about the world. You would think definitely in unprecedented circumstances a lot of us haven't faced before, that's for sure. But in terms of yourself, what's your vision, Danielle? Where do you sort of go from here? You've sort of established yourself. You're very good at what you do. I speak from experience. You're very talented at what you do. You've got the ability to certainly do great sessions. You incorporate, like you've mentioned before, relaxation and mindfulness sessions too. But what's your vision, Danielle? Where do you sort of see yourself going from here?
I see most of my work with children, like probably like 80% with children and 20% with adults. And I see more work within primary schools, which is what like my market is and what I do. So that the children are getting a break in the school day, because school days are just hectic and pressure for the teachers and the children. So I see that, but also I wouldn't mind in the next few years maybe opening just a children's yoga, because there isn't anything like that really. There's loads of yoga studios that offer like children's yoga or family yoga, but I think just like an actual children's centre, which is just well-being in total, so it's not just yoga, it's anything to do with breath work, mindfulness, nutrition, just like the full package. That's where I see my vision of things going, because I just adore working with children. It's just what I feel like what I'm born to do, and
your calling. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really good point you've made there. I think sometimes we sort of, and I suppose with all things really in life, we can sort of things. You kind of start off on one level, and you sort of move along your journey, and sort of sometimes just be open to where the universe sort of takes you as well, for sure. And I think that, like you mentioned there about sort of finding a teacher, sometimes that can be a bit of a mindful too, if I'm honest, Danielle. And I think that yoga for me at this moment in time, I'd like to see it introduced at least outside school curriculum, just to sort of give the young people an option, even if it's just breath work to calm the nervous system down. My experience of seeing what sort of teaching's going, I mean, this is not having to go at the teachers of the schools, they're doing the best they can in challenging situations, but I think some of the homeschooling, at least in my opinion from what I've seen, isn't as good as it could be. I think that bringing things in like yoga would help a lot, absolutely, but that's just sort of the way I sort of see the world. And it can be very difficult sort of finding a teacher and sort of trawling through YouTube, and there's so much out there and that sort of stuff, so that can be a challenging thing too. But in terms of our listeners, if anyone's sort of interested to know more about what you do or contact you via social media, do you have like website, Danielle, that people can see, or your own sort of Facebook page and stuff like that you'd like to sort of mention?
Yeah, definitely, because the more work in schools and with children, like, the better at this point. So my name is kalmerkidzyoga, but that's with a K, so it's KALMER, and then kids, KIDZ, yoga. And you'll find me on Instagram, like Facebook. And then there's all of my contact information regarding classes, like one-to-one classes, work within schools, family classes, children classes, like anything to do with your standard yoga classes, really. It's all on there.
Absolutely, that's great stuff. So it's been a pleasure talking to you, Danielle. I've really sort of gained interesting insight into your perception and your experience. So I really want to thank you for coming aboard the show. I'm sure our listeners have sort of really enjoyed listening to the show and sort of hearing your perspective and experiences around yoga. So thanks for joining us, Danielle. We wish you all the very best, for the future in what you do and your vision for getting yoga out there and introducing it into schools more and more. So that's great stuff. So thanks again, Danielle. So that was Danielle.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you, Danielle. And that was Danielle Hutchinson, Karma Kids Yoga, who's kindly joined us on the show, the Friday Sports Show, Salford City Radio on 94.5 FM, with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing all the news from the local area and around the world.